welcome back to our listeners today. So today we're talking to business owners, and one of the common pitfalls that we see with business owners is when they put so much emphasis on that one precious asset that they have, which is their business, and what things are going well there and what is maybe what they're missing when we're talking about their overall financial plan. So let's go ahead and talk today a little bit, just dive in. We've got some examples that we want to share, but we want to talk to business owners who have been successful, right? It could be that case scenario where their business is thriving, it's profitable, and they foresee an exit strategy. They foresee a future of being able to sell this company. And so they're not stocking away in their retirement plan. They don't have an investment account, right? They're not investing elsewhere because they're putting so much time and effort into their current business, or it may be more than one business, and it's doing really well, right? What risks might they bear that maybe they don't know?
Well, I think it comes back to your comment, it's their baby, right? So they were there during the thought, during the conception, during the birth, and now you're growing it. And at what stage do you allow it to grow? And again, everybody has this view of what their business is. Oftentimes the people that start the business are not the best people to run the business. So that's something we see all the time. It takes a different set of skill sets, knowledge and such as that to run a business that has got off the ground and started. So anyway.
Well, and what to do with the extra money was obvious. First, entrepreneurs are trying to build their life. They're trying to get to cash flow positive. They're trying to get enough money to pay their own bills. And once they start having excess, they're thinking about tax planning because they're being hit with more taxes than they ever have. They're thinking about reinvestment. They're thinking about growth. So it's kind of like climbing a hill, right? All the money had a job. It's going back into the business. They're expanding equipment. They're expanding staff. They're finally able to spend on their family what they felt maybe in years prior they weren't able to. Those are the hard years. But there comes a point, as you're climbing up that hill, just as you said, Laura, that you see the future and say, maybe I'll sell this someday, or I don't know what I'm going to do, but I don't want to be in a position where I'm stuck. And that's what we're talking to is the people who get stuck. You've done great, you've built the business, and there's no plan for the future yet. So the bad outcome could be you don't make a plan. You don't do anything next. 10 years go down the road, and you realize your kids aren't actually going to take it over. You thought they were, but they're not going to take it over. And
Right.
You didn't build anything else in your life. So we want to talk about, before we get there, how do we fix it?
And I want to interject here too, because there are a couple scenarios. Basically, what we're talking about is when we think about your overall financial portfolio, we think of diversification. We think of where are you holding your investments, right? And a business is an investment. So if you as the business owner, if this is your baby and you are, it is so important to you, you have put so much into it, you know the value of this company. Maybe there is one liquidation event and maybe you do have some success and you sell that company, but you automatically roll it over into another business, two business entities. We deal a lot with serial entrepreneurs, right? We're still in the same vein of investing. So if we scroll back and we're looking at a macro perspective, we're still saying the majority of your investment, of your net worth, is held up in a business. It'd be like going to the stock market and putting all your eggs in Apple stock, right? I'm holding this one company. Now, your company isn't Apple stock, but you are essentially holding all of your investment value in that one company. And there's risks, right, to doing that.
And every entrepreneur
there's always the stories of somebody winning because they did put everything in one stock. But there's also all the stories of people that have lost everything because their emphasis was so concentrated and they didn't diversify. I'm sorry, Jeremiah, I cut you off.
No, you're good. I think we see so many entrepreneurs, you have to concentrate, you have to focus, you have to put everything in one basket to build it and grow it. But there comes a time where now you've got the growth, you had an exit, you have a second by the apple that you did some rollovers, you have a second or third company. Now it's a time to say, even though I'm growing this and as I'm still growing it, I need to start diversifying my family, diversifying my holdings, for the benefit of the future. So I think it's a great setup, Laura, of, concentrating initially, but at some point you got to pull your head up and you got to diversify.
Some point, whether physically you're not able to do the work anymore, mentally you're not able to do the work anymore, or you don't desire to do the work anymore. So even if you're young and your business is thriving, you think, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, or I am so good at this, there is going to be a moment in time when you're thinking about retirement. And so what we do oftentimes as financial planners is say, it's so great to come into your story at this point in time. We care about you today, but we also care about you and your family 30 years from now. So what decisions are you making now? And so your business now is thriving, but it's not your 401k, right? It's not going to provide for you just that one asset, right? If you only rely on that, is that really the best plan as you step into retirement? So,
Yep. We have two, I mean, just as a story, we have two clients right now that have great businesses, but they're actively involved in them. They're running them and they are considering retirement, but selling the business, both of them are kind of like, I'm not sure who's going to buy this. Like maybe a competitor, but the value is their time and they make really good money for what they do and how they do it. But for them to exit all the knowledge, all the gumption, all the relationships to step out, they don't have a huge staff. They don't have someone who's going to replace it. They need somebody who's going to be them basically to take this over. And the two industries they're in, they don't have, you know, someone in their company who can take it over, and they don't anticipate someone wants to get into this industry. So they're really struggling. And personally, they have built their own retirements. They're fine. You know, they'll be able to retire. But what used to be, I'm going to build the business and sell it someday, that sell it someday, it may not be a reality for them, just the nature of the industries they're in. So they may just have to close it down, which feels so painful. And the reason they're still working because they just can't bring themselves to close it down. But there's no one that's able to take it over and run it the way that they did to really see that future value.
Yeah. And we get it. Like creating a succession plan is hard. You may have started with some sort of succession plan in mind. And I think Dad can attest that there's lots of different life events and circumstances that come along the way in the years that you've been a business owner. Obviously, we're a family-owned business. There's a high concentration in our area of businesses that are like us. Sometimes they adopt different types of succession plans than other companies. Do you have ambitions to go public one day? Do you have ambitions to sell it to your competitor? Right? And so as much forethought as you can put into your succession plan, that will be helpful, but it doesn't always mitigate some of the risks that you have.
Right.
What
And
if the markets shift?
there's a lot of risks, right? There's a lot of risks out there. And a lot of entrepreneurs are just blind to them. They think they're kind of Superman. I always like to comment,
industry.
Muhammad Ali on an airplane, and the stewardess said, you need to buckle up. We got a plane, he says, Superman doesn't need to buckle up. He said, Superman doesn't, you can't fly, in other words.
Yeah, you're not on a plane. Superman's not on a plane. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Superman doesn't need a plane, so you better hang on here, bud.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
No, currently we're living in a time for the AI is being implemented all over the place and things are changing so quickly and business owners are trying to adapt and trying to understand and trying to become more efficient. And this is a very real risk. And I'm just using that one example. There are other major shifts in the marketplace that can, make your business redundant. We're not saying that it's going to be, but what we're talking about here is there are some risks. Even if right now it's hard to imagine your business folding or not doing well, right? There's some risk there.
Right. Well, one other risk in another client story, we have a client who's in the construction business. They're very successful. They've built over years and years, and they were able to have a child of theirs take over the business. It was this great moment. Hey, they're going to take it over. I'm going to be able to exit. But they realized, and when you start working with them, they realized that the exiting generation needed the money from the business for the next 10 years or so. They weren't able in a financial place to be able to rely on their own retirement to be exit. And so there was this not weird, but there was this unique negotiation between the two families to say, we're going to take over the business, but then realizing we need you to pay us a certain amount for a certain amount of time. That was, it was burdensome to the business. The business was going to have to pay the working family as well as the retired family meaningful salaries in order to get this to be successful and for both families to be successful. And it really, I feel, tied their hands a lot in what they were able to do in the exit. And how beautiful to come in the other spot to say, we want to work on this transition, and we've already built our retirement. We've already built our future. We have the ability to work with a lot of different structures.
Right.
Yeah, and again,
that's
psychologically,
some form
you
of
can.
liquidity risk. Yeah,
Right.
sorry. That's like some form of liquidity risk. Do I have the cash flow in the company to pay other family members? So sorry, Dad.
I mean, psychologically, you can really handicap the generation that's going to buy the business, because your expectation in building the business is different than the one that's going to manage the business. I've always made the comment, you have the entrepreneurial spirit that starts it, And then you have the second generation that comes up, manages it. And then the third generation says, no, I don't want to do this. So they just sell it. So it's a different mentality to start a business versus the one to run it. And so you have to be very careful that you don't psychologically handicap that second generation to do things for you that your expectations will never get fulfilled completely. And it creates a lot of family tension too.
So
So
what if
really
we
what we're getting to is that, your business, even if it's multiple entities, right? That's one asset, but wisdom would tell you you need more than just one. And so we're going to kind of transition into talking about broad-based diversification, right? My business is doing well. Why do I need an investment account? Why do I need a 401k?
Mhm. Yeah, and I think all the reasons we talked about, the world changes. You have different options, you have different opportunities. The thing that we talk about a lot is businesses are hard to sell, right? They're hard to move on. Whereas when you build these other accounts, they're really easy to pivot. And ideally, sometimes they age and exit a active oar in the water, running the business. They want to have plenty of other assets in other things. And there's seasons where real estate is so good, right? Real estate has made so many people wealthy and preserved their wealth. Real estate also has hard moments. Real estate also can be hard to sell in a down market. Equities have done so well for so many people, stocks, they've done so well. They also go up and down. And we talk about the different eggs and different baskets. We now talk about crypto on a regular basis with clients. People, they bring up gold, they bring up these other funds that are limited and say, where do these fit into my portfolio? And often when we talk to people, it's not a either or, it's a yes and. Like, let's spread out all the different things you're holding so that when you do get to retirement, you've got multiple buckets that are not just what type of asset, but even the tax characteristics. What's going to come out to you tax free? What's going to have some tax tied to it? So there's so much flexibility later in life. It's such a useful thing, but none of those start easy. We're just meeting with a client 2 days ago that talked about wanting to make some big investments through a Roth account. And we said, this could be so useful for your future. There's some great tax benefits, but they have to build up the Roth account. It takes time to get the kind of money in there. And so had they started this, 8 years ago, they would be in a wonderful spot. Because they're starting today, they're not going to be able to make some of those big investments for a number of
Right.
years.
Right. So timing is important. I was thinking about another client that we met with recently who they inherited several properties. And so even though they have tremendous wealth, it's holding illiquid assets. So the business could be, like we talked about before, kind of an illiquid structure of business, depending on the type of business you have. But to sell it, you might own the building in which your business operates. You may have other real estate holdings that you've either inherited or you've purchased for the sake of passive income, right? That can totally be a piece of your investment puzzle and a very strategic choice and one that we would recommend. But if you become overly leveraged in those illiquid assets, just the other day we were having a conversation and it was with a couple and one of them said, it's so funny because when we're talking to our friends, I'm pretty certain they have the impression that we are tremendously wealthy because they talk about the holdings that they have.
Right.
But they said, but we feel, I'm just paraphrasing, cash flow poor. I'm concerned, like inflation, cost of living. We've got a family that we're trying to raise. Like we've got college that we're anticipating for each one of our children, right? So they were feeling a strain on their budget. And that is exactly what that sort of liquidity risk is. So when we look at your investment portfolio, we're looking at what types of investments so that we can unleash them, right? Just in the right moments.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
good.
Real estate, going back to that, just to reemphasize that, real estate, you cannot sell a piece of it. You can borrow against it, and then the cost of borrowing, of course, when interest rates are low, it makes sense. When interest rates are higher, like it is right now, it's really hard. You got to pay that back. But again, real estate is compared to a stock portfolio. You can sell a stock. You don't have to sell the entire portfolio. I think that's what we're talking about, liquidity here. In real estate is really hard. You can't just sell a portion of the real estate and then you do the refinance in any way. The economic times can really work against you. So you have to be really careful on how you do that.
Right.
The best time to go to the bank is when you don't need to borrow.
Love that.
I like that.
Love that.
So I think as we, kind of bring a little bit of a direction point, like what do you do? And I think step one is you got to make a plan knowing, hey, when I get to retirement at age, whatever you're interested in, what am I going to need? What am I going to need to have? I'm going to have some money in my company. I hope to sell it. Great. I'm going to need some qualified tax retirement accounts. Those could be good. Kind of walking through what, even to say like, what's my number? What's the retirement going to look like for me? So step one, getting some of a plan and a goal. I think step two is starting to be real strategic. If that goal is, 5 years away, 6 years away, what needs to happen between now and then to get you there? And we have clients that come all the time and say, don't I need a Roth account? Should I have a retirement account? And the question is, or the answer is probably, but it depends. We need to figure out where you're headed, what you care about. If people are very charitably minded, they want to give large legacy gifts later in life. That may be very different than someone who wants to pass the money to their kids, though someone who's just going to use the money themselves and fund adventures. So I
Right.
think first two steps, get a plan, get some strategy.
Yeah, I love this. This is the dynamic part of what we do. People ask us, like, do you feel a threat to your industry with robo advisors or AI? Well, you could go into AI and say, I would like an investment portfolio of this sort of diversification or these sorts of holdings. Sure, very transactional. Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't feel a threat with that. But this conversation that we're talking about around creating a dynamic plan, decisions, what are you about? What do you want to be about? Where do you like to give? How do you like to give? What's your involvement in your community? What are your goals? What's your vision, right? All of that gets distilled down into your unique fit custom plan. It has to do with your appetite for risk, right? Let's talk about alternative investments. You referenced how much more frequently we're having conversations about crypto and holding crypto. That can be a portion of your investment portfolio. But if you're just planning to put it all in, so to speak, cross your fingers, close your eyes, and hope you're going to hit the moon, right?
Vegas is 5 hours away. Go there, but don't use your investment portfolio for this, all right? This is not
Yeah.
a place to risk,
Yeah,
to
don't pay
take that
me to manage
gambling.
that outcome for you because I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The other one I think is as we get a plan, something that's custom, is kind of the implementation, and I would even say the discipline is not quite the right word, but the consistency of doing that. Like we have a number of people, we make a plan, both spouses as business owners, they're on board, they understand the plan, they're excited about it. We set the structures, the accounts they need, but then over the next few years, they got to get the money into those accounts. And there's some who that's a discipline, right? That we have to help guide them to do that. Others, they just feel so relieved and confident. I finally know what to do when we have a good year. I finally know what to do when we have a hard year at the business and how to survive that. Like that, I think consistency then starts seeing the progress. I think people get excited more and more about the plan to say, hey, I'm seeing that we're making these major strides over these years towards our future that we are excited about.
Mhm.
The other one I throw in there always is this, as we talk about the structure, is when you think about your business exit. My background is in mergers, acquisitions, helping people buy and sell businesses. If the first time you've thought about selling your business is the day someone comes up and says, "Hey, I think I'd like to buy your business," oh man, you're way behind already. How you have your company structured, S corp, C corp, how you have your employees compensated, even the level of your contracts with your vendors and your customers, what kind of terms are in those that make this repeatable business, all that makes a huge difference on what you're going to get when you sell your business. And so, I always tell people, we want to talk through that stuff. We're not the consultants who are going to come into your business, but we are going to talk through and light up those ideas to say, hey, if you're potentially going to sell this someday, let's look at what you got in place. Let's talk about transitioning yourselves into a place where you're sellable, where you can maximize that value. And that is some years in the making migrations that become so valuable at that
Mhm.
moment of exit.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
think your comment is that if somebody comes and talks to you about buying your business and you haven't considered what your business is worth and how you would structure that, what some ideas, you are way behind the curve. And it is a transition that is a moment in time, that is a critical event. And most people don't understand all the details that have to go in to selling a business. And there's
Mhm.
also, I mean, everybody looks at, well, I'm getting X amount of dollars from the sale of my business. Okay, how much taxes do you have to pay? What's going to be your contracts that you have with your vendors? Will they stay? There's so many factors these in a business that most business owners don't think about, don't
Right.
realize, and that's why you do that way ahead of time. And I think the sales strategy should be 5 to 10 years before the event. And people say, well,
Mhm.
nobody's even offered to buy my business. That makes no difference.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
in that case scenario, like, let's just assume somebody does come up to you and you feel like you're on your back foot. I don't know. I've never thought about selling my business. Well, just consider that a wake up call, right? If this is news to you, if this is the first time this has happened, maybe pass on that first offer, but start to get your ducks in a row. What would it look like if I sold? How would that be structured? Certainly consult some experts because there is quite a few questions that you kind of don't even know you need to ask.
And valuation can change. There's a good time to sell real estate. There's a good time to buy real estate. The same thing with business. There's a good time to sell your business. There's a good time to buy a business. So you got to understand the economic cycle, the market conditions, and all the factors that go into the overall macroeconomic that would affect your business. When can you get the best valuation for your business? So again,
that's so
people
good.
oftentimes don't think about it until they get an opportunity to sell. Well, why is somebody knocking on your door in the first place to buy your business? Is there an event out there that you're unaware of? Is there circumstances that you're not aware of that that you should be, right?
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and recap because I think we've touched on a lot of things. So, some of the takeaways here from our time together are just don't wait too long to diversify. And when you think of your business as your primary asset, consider it as just one of your assets and that it's best to diversify. The other thing that we talked about is just consider the sale of your business in advance. There's complexities to taxes, complexities to transferring wealth to the next generation, liquidating investments, right? There's just a lot of complexity. And so if you're out there and some of these topics kind of resonated with you, or you feel the urge to get a plan in place, get your money organized, make sure that your professional success is benefiting you personally, and that someday you can actually plan for retirement, one that you can enjoy, come talk to us. We are certified financial planners. We're a team. We love talking to people through the strategy that best serves them.
Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit trichordadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@trichordadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Trichord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.